Hello, scholars. Here we are at lesson 61. Yes, you heard that correctly, 61. I know we yesterday did 59. Lesson 60 is a test that we're not going to worry about right now. So we're skipping past that lesson 60 test, and we're going to lesson 61 so we can continue with a little more of our story about Wendy and Sydney. Now, scholars, lesson 61 today is actually going to be our last lesson with Wendy and Sydney until after winter break. Next week, we're going to spend a little time with that solar system booklet that you brought home. So you'll want to make sure you have that handy and ready to use. And then after winter break, we'll be back with Wendy and Sydney. So enjoy today's story, and then know we're taking a little break from them, but we'll visit with them again in 2021. If you don't have your reading book and your packet, press pause, go grab your reading book and your packet, and then join me at lesson 61. Column 1. Word 1 is receive. What word? Right, receive. 2 is assigned. What word? Right, assigned. A person who is assigned a book is the person who is using that book. Someone who is assigned a room is the one who uses that room. I've been assigned a classroom in the building. Could you imagine if another class also tried to come in there and use it and said, well, we were going to use this room and we were already there? It would be very confusing. So each teacher and class is assigned a room. Word 3, telescope. What word? Right, telescope. And word 4, lava. As in I lava being your reading teacher. Okay, lava is in the melted molten rock. Lava. What word? Right, lava. Let's do column 1 the quick way. Receive, assigned, telescope, lava. I would love it to go on to column 2. Column 2. All the words in column 2 have endings called suffixes. I'm going to give you the root word, and then you give me the whole word with that suffix. Word 1. The root word is equip. What's the whole word? Right, equipped. When you're well equipped for doing something, it means you have all the equipment or supplies you need to do that something. Right? Think about what would it mean if you're well equipped to go outside in very cold, snowy weather? Can you think of things you would need if you're well equipped for that? Did you mention some of these things? A warm coat, maybe snow pants, snow boots, gloves, a scarf, a hat, right? Those are all things that I think would make you well equipped for being outside in the cold, snowy weather. Word 2, the root word is gas. What's the whole word? Yes, gases. Number 3, the root word is erupt. What's the whole word? Good, erupting. Scholars, before we continue, I'm remembering how we recently were with Carla and Edna and an erupting volcano, and now we've had the word lava and the word erupting. It makes me wonder what's going on or coming up for Wendy and Sydney. I bet some of us have some predicting. Word 4. The root word is surround. What's the whole word? Yes, surrounded. Number 5. The root word is tower. What's the whole word? Correct, towers. Number 6. The root word is impress. Actually, the root word would be press. It has a prefix, im. Press. The whole word is impressive. That was an impressive job. Let's do column 2 the quick way. Ready? Equipped, gases, erupting, surrounded, towers, impressive. Nice job, scholars. Let's celebrate by doing column 3. Word 1 is dome. What word? Right, Dome. Word 2 is restless. What word? Great, restless. Word 3, instead. Good. Word 4, what word? Yes, view. Word 5 is soup. What word? Nice. And 6 is program. What word? Good job, program. All right, column 3 the quick way, then we'll get to our story. Ready? Oops. Dome, restless, instead, view, soup, program. All right. If you feel like you want to practice or review any of those vocabulary words, go ahead, press pause. Otherwise, we're moving to today's story as we continue with with Sydney and Wendy. Io. The last 2 days of the trip went slowly. Wendy didn't sleep well on the last night. Scholars, before we continue, do you remember how long the trip is going to take to get from Earth to Jupiter? Did you say 4.5 days? That would be correct. And how did Wendy sleep the first night? Right, not well. And then how did she sleep the second night? Right, she did okay. And now we jumped ahead to the last night. And how did she sleep? Right, not well again. And how many more nights would there be? Correct, none. Wendy was getting very restless. Do you know what it means when you're feeling restless? We talked about that vocabulary word a while back, right? You're restless. You kind of want to do something else, right? You're having trouble sitting still and staying focused on one particular thing, right? Sometimes you might feel restless when you're at school. Maybe you're feeling restless sitting and watching the video lesson because you have to watch it at home and it's harder than being at school watching it, right? I'm much more entertaining in person at school. All right, so she's feeling restless. Let's find out more about that. She could hardly wait to get to Jupiter. So scholars, she's excited about getting to Jupiter. Have you ever been restless because you're excited for something? Yeah, I bet you have. Actually, the spaceship would not land on Jupiter. It would land on one of Jupiter's larger moons, named Io. Jupiter has a gravity that is much stronger than that of Earth. A large man weighs about 200 pounds on Earth. That same man would weigh 500 pounds on Jupiter. So, would the man be heavier on Earth or on Jupiter? Right, on Jupiter. That man would weigh so much on Jupiter that he could hardly stand up. He would feel as if he were carrying 2 people on his back. So, you might be able to do that for a little bit, but could you do that all the time? Carrying 2 people around on your back all the time, right? It would get hard to move and you would get very tired. That's how it would feel if you were on Jupiter. Wow. So scholars, did you catch why she's feeling restless? Make sure you're paying attention to that part. There was another reason that the spaceship would not land on the surface of Jupiter. The planet is surrounded by a thick layer of gas. The surface of the planet is dark. Even with bright lights, it is impossible to see more than a few meters. So what did we just hear surrounds Jupiter? Yes, a thick layer of gas. And it makes everything dark. So imagine trying to land there if you can't see. Right? I can understand why they're going to land on Io. So, instead of landing on the surface of Jupiter, Traveler 4 would land on Io, a moon about as big as our moon. Io is very close to the surface of Jupiter. There are no gases surrounding Io. In fact, there is nothing but empty space surrounding Io. Io floats through space, and it moves around Jupiter very fast. Io goes all the way around Jupiter in about 2 days. So, everyone, this is a fact we're going to want to remember. How long does it take Io to circle all the way around Jupiter? 2 days. Now remember, Jupiter is very big, and Io goes all the way around it in 2 days. So it's moving pretty fast. Let's continue. Tracking fingers should be on the last morning paragraph. See if you can find it. Are you one of my good trackers? The last morning on Traveler 4 was very busy. The flight attendants showed the passengers how to put on their spacesuits. Remember, one of the flight attendants said, there is no oxygen on Io. There is oxygen inside the space station, but when you go outside, you must wear your spacesuit, or you'll die. So, scholars, how much oxygen is there on Io? None. So what do you have to make sure you are wearing when you walk around Io? Right, your swimsuit. I mean, your spacesuit. Yes, spacesuit. The attendant continued. When you leave the space station, you must go with another person. Your spacesuit is equipped with an automatic radio that tells you where you are and how to get back to the space station. The radio also tells you how much more air you have in your oxygen tanks. So, scholars, can you name some of those things that the automatic radio tells you? Let's see. It tells you where you are. It tells you how to get back to the space station from where you are. And it tells you how much air is left in your oxygen tanks. Did you say any of those things? Good listening. The spacesuit was very heavy. The flight attendants helped Wendy and the other passengers get into their suits. 2 large tanks were attached to the back of each spacesuit. These tanks held oxygen that the person would breathe. Look at the picture of the spacesuit. So everyone, let's do that for a moment. Touch those 2 oxygen tanks that are on the back. And now touch that helmet. The passengers could hardly walk in their spacesuits. Why? Sure, because of how heavy they are. So remember, right now there's gravity inside the space station. So they've got those heavy suits on and those 2 oxygen tanks where there's still gravity, right, with the gravity device on. Don't worry, the flight attendant said. Io is quite a bit smaller than Earth. So the gravity on Io is less than it is on Earth. That means that you won't feel very heavy in your spacesuit when you walk around on Io. So scholars, I just passed the blue star. Are you one of my star trackers? In fact, you should be able to jump 8 feet high on Io. That should make you feel like a super basketball player. 8 feet high. Scholars, maybe ask someone in your family if they could measure out 8 feet high. Right? I think here where I live, my ceilings, I think, are 10 feet high. I don't know if you can, well, it'll be hard to tell, but right, it would mean I could jump all the way up. My feet would be almost up at the ceiling level as I was jumping. So 8 feet high doesn't mean you can just jump 8 feet. It means you're jumping 8 feet. So where your feet are, there's 8 feet below you. Oh my goodness. That's quite a big jump. That would make you a very super basketball player. So I encourage you to measure out what 8 feet high looks like. After the passengers walked around in their spacesuits, they took them off and put them away. In the middle of the afternoon, the engines of the spaceship started up. Remember, they didn't have to be on while they were in space, right? The engines are slowing us down, a flight attendant explained. It will take us about 3 hours to slow to the same speed that Io is going. Right? Does that make sense to everyone? They need to slow down and match that speed. Otherwise, how do you try to land on something that's moving, that you're moving too fast for? Right? Think about that with an airplane, right? If you've been in an airplane and the airplane comes down, right, it has to slow down to match the movement of the Earth. All right. The view outside the window was incredible. The planet Jupiter was so huge that it seemed to cover half the sky. From time to time, the flight attendant pointed out interesting facts about the planet. At one time, she said, "If you look at the lower half of the planet, you will see a part that looks something like an eye." Wendy could see it clearly. The attendant said, "That eye is 2 times as big as Earth." Wendy shook her head. "Incredible," she said. So scholars, if you look at page 305 and you find that eye, right? It's this part right here, right? 2 Earths fit in there. So think about how big that makes Jupiter compared to Earth. 2 times bigger than Earth. 2 Earths could fit in that spot. All right, I'm going to have you read the rest of this to yourself, and I've got a couple questions for you at the end. What was the thin line of smoke coming from? Now, if you don't know, you should make sure you go back to read. And the pilot, remember, is trying to slow down the spaceship, so the engines are now running again. Did you take a good look at that space station? Could you find the dome and the 3 towers? All right. So, scholars, we're ending right now with Wendy and Sydney at a very exciting part. They're just about to land on Io. And we won't be back with them now until 2021. So keep in mind, they're making that landing, hopefully, and then getting ready to do some space exploring. It's an exciting time for us to stop. To be continued. All right, join me in your packet for a moment. All right, looking in our packet today for lesson 61. At the beginning of today's story, the author tells us that Wendy was feeling restless. And if you listened, scholars, to the reading at the beginning of this, right, I talked a little bit about the word restless and what that means and why someone might be feeling that way. Why was she feeling this way? Use 2 pieces of evidence from the text. So we know she was feeling restless. Why was she feeling restless? So again, scholars, I'm looking down here at the rubric, right? And I know I want to use words from the question in my answer, right? That's how I make a complete answer that makes sense to readers. So, Wendy was feeling restless because, right? That's a great word to include in an answer when you've been asked why. Because and right, because remember, I want 2 pieces of evidence. Da-da, 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 right? So, This does not have to be the way you start it or set up your answer, but scholars, this is really good modeling of using words from the question and then also setting it up to make sure that you get two pieces of evidence to support, right? What two things did you read that tell that she's restless? Like, do a little digging, looking toward the beginning of today's story, find out why she was feeling restless. And then number two, what is a time that you felt restless? Why did you feel that way? So, I felt restless. Look at how I'm using words from the question, right? Felt restless. You, right? I'm writing about myself. So, I felt restless when because, right? Why did you feel restless at that time? Ding! This word why means your answer should have a because in it. So, a time you felt restless, and then why did you feel restless? Like, why was that something that made you restless? All right. That, scholars, is going to be how you get your full 5 points for today, right? You're making that connection to yourself. That's what question number 2 is here. 2 pieces of evidence for number 1, that you answered all the parts, and that you used the question, words from the question in your answer, and that you capitalized and punctuated your answers. Scholars, we are looking very forward to reading about how you knew she was restless and about a time you yourself felt restless. And then remember, scholars, we're going to be taking a break from Wendy and Sydney and their soon-to-be, it seems, adventure on Io, and spend some time next week learning about the solar system. We'll be back with Wendy and Sydney again in 2021. Thanks for joining me today.